Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie and I read a lot of books. I finished 2 books while I was on holiday in Spain just recently, and it meant that I finished the Discovery of Witches trilogy because I finished the Book of Life out there, and then the other book was Sing You Home by Jodi Picoult. So I'm going to talk about this one today. Now this one, I think it's one that will divide opinion because there's religious themes to it, there's political themes to it, but it is very powerful. Jodi Picoult herself wrote some songs that accompany each section of the book. There's actually a QR code next to each chapter. Unfortunately, the QR codes don't work anymore. They don't take you to that page. I'm guessing it's just since the website and everything's been updated, because this book was published in 2011 and the song lyrics were created in 2011. So yeah, the QR codes don't work anymore, but I did find a playlist of all the songs that go with the book on Soundcloud. So that's where I got to listen to them, and they're just such lovely, powerful lyrics and songs. But yeah, this is about the book, and I found it quite clever how they've combined the music with it, considering that music is such a heavy theme of the book. But yeah, so I'm just going to get on and read the blurb for you, and then I can really go to town on this book. After Zoe Baxter loses her baby, the only way she can find of coping is to try again. But her husband Max disagrees. More than that, he wants a divorce. When they separate, there's no mention of the unborn children they created together still waiting at the clinic. Then Zoe falls in love again, out of the blue, and finds herself with an unexpected second chance to have a family. But Max has found a new life too, one with no place in it for people like Zoe. And he will stand up in court to say that her new choice of partner makes her an unfit mother. Jodi Picoult's most powerful novel yet asks who has the right to decide what makes the ideal family. The beginning of the book is very sad because I'll admit because I started by reading 1 chapter of this, and then my mum wanted a book to take on a narrowboat, so I let her have it, and then she read it all, and then she gave it back to me just 2 days before the end of the holiday, saying I finished it, and then I read this in 2 days. Just sitting around the pool in the sun. It's a very, very powerful book, and it really does get you thinking. And I was talking to my mum as I was reading the chapter, saying, oh, I really hate Max, and she's just like, oh, just wait a minute. And by the end of it, you kind of question yourself who the baddie is, and it becomes quite clear of the religious and political themes throughout the book. Because when Zoe and Max split up, they both find themselves on completely unknown territory, and they both find themselves in places that are completely different than the circumstances they were originally in. Yeah, because when I said to my mum, it's just like, oh, is this a sad book? Based on what I'd already read of it. She was like, no, it's more heartwarming. And then you go into the first couple of chapters of Zoe and you're just like, are you sure this isn't a sad book? Because it starts off with Zoe heavily pregnant. She's about 5 months pregnant, so she's not heavily pregnant, she's about 5-6 months pregnant, and she is a music therapist, so she goes into hospitals, she uses it in school counselling, and basically she finds a way to use music to help people. I'll admit, I found out about music therapy when I was at university, but I've always been quite fascinated as to how music affects the brain. I find it strange how you can hear a song from your childhood and still remember all the words, even when you haven't heard it in like 20 years. It's incredible, and that's how Zoe helps other people and ultimately helps herself as well. It's how she kind of puts herself back together again after the breakup with Max. Zoe is actually at her baby shower when she realises that there's something wrong, and she goes to the hospital. They were looking for a heartbeat, and they say, I'm sorry, your child is gone and you have to give birth. And you know, I wouldn't wish that kind of thing on my worst enemy, because it's such a horrible thing to go through, and already I can imagine people having opinions on that based on everything else that happens in the book, because Zoe goes from losing the baby to then Max saying, I don't want to do this anymore, not just having the baby, but I'm not committed to this marriage anymore because I've been through the ringer too. So after that, Zoe realises she doesn't really have many friends to support her after that, and then she makes friends with somebody who's kind of a friend of a friend of. So this woman, Vanessa, she was actually at the baby shower as somebody that she has helped in a professional setting before but doesn't know her that well. And then through that they create a friendship, which then leads on to more. As you go on, you realise that Zoe and Vanessa, without even realising it, have fallen in love. And Zoe then soon after that discovers that she has ovarian cancer, which fortunately is caught quite early in the book, and so it's that whole thing of, it just seems to be one thing after another for Zoe at the beginning of the book, from losing the baby, losing Max, almost dying and hemorrhaging and finding out about the cancer. And then everything turns around with Vanessa when she realises, I'm in love with Vanessa and I want to spend the rest of my life with her. She doesn't completely want to write off all that time that she spent with Max, because obviously they were together for, I think it's 9-10 years. Through all that you also find out that Max is an alcoholic and he has been sneaking alcohol into the house for a very, very long time, and that Zoe pretty much knew about it but didn't really say anything. And it's Max's alcoholism that then kind of leads on to the rest of his story. The chapters are basically split up into Zoe, Max, and then when Vanessa comes in, Vanessa. So you've got those 3 points of view throughout the book leading up to the event that happens. As it says in the blurb, that when they separate, they don't really think about the unborn children they created together. So after Zoe goes through like IVF and everything, and because they just want a quick divorce, they're only representing themselves, they don't realise that the embryos they created are considered property that they need to split in the divorce. They completely forget about it until Zoe realises that she can have a family with her new partner. That's the point when Zoe goes to Max and says, there's a couple of events leading up to the point when she asks for his permission to use the embryos. But by that point, Max already knows about the relationship that Zoe has with Vanessa. And she asks Max for the use of the embryos because she's there going, I might not be able to have a child anymore after everything I've gone through, but me and Vanessa can use my embryos and insert them into Vanessa. And then, because of where it's set in New Jersey? Basically, it's a state that didn't recognise gay marriage at the time that this was written. Obviously, since then, a lot of things have changed, but at the time that this was written, it wasn't legal in all states. And so Vanessa and Zoe actually go to the next state along to get married, but obviously in their home state their marriage isn't actually recognised as a marriage, and that Zoe would actually have to adopt the child that Vanessa is carrying despite being biologically related to it. I don't think I ever realised how many hoops I had to jump through, so I can only say this was a learning experience for me, especially with it being set in America. And I never really understood the ins and outs of how. To be honest, I'm still a bit iffy on it, understanding the ins and outs of the way laws change across the states. You'd think it would just be one big country thing, but it's not. Obviously there are the general laws, but it's just like something that's legal in New York might not be legal in South Carolina. It's interesting to read about that part. But yes, so once Zoe asks Max for permission to use the embryos, he says he'll have to think about it. And this is where I can talk a bit more about Max's journey, because once the breakup happens, Max drowns his sorrows in more alcohol to the point where he goes and drives drunk on a road at night, where he then hallucinates Zoe on the road, swerves, and almost kills himself basically. Fortunately nobody else is involved in the accident, but at that point when he starts to question everything, because you're introduced to his brother and his brother's wife, Lindy. Is it Liddy or Lindy or Liddy? Liddy. I don't know why I wanted to call her Lindy, like Lindy Bop. It's Liddy, like Lydia, Liddy. Basically, throughout the book, you start to realise that Max has always had, despite being on rocky ground to begin with when he first met Liddy, you then start to realise that actually he has always had a bit of a crush on his brother's wife, which makes things very complicated as the more things come out. Max's brother is called Reed, and Reed's wife is Liddy. Throughout the whole book, you're very aware of the religious side of it when you find out about Reed and Liddy as born-again Christians, and the things that they decide to focus on and the things they decide not to focus on. Basically, they're trying to convert Max once Max breaks up with Zoe. And at first, Max is very, it's for you but it's not for me kind of thing, but then after the accident where he almost kills himself and realises he could get into serious trouble because he's been driving drunk, he's then like, he actually says, when they ask for his like, who should we call for you, and he says, will you please call my brother's pastor? And that's the point when it's just like, oh, this feels like it's on a bit of a slippery slope here, because it feels like the only reason he's turned to religion in this case is because he knows how much trouble he's in. And I feel like religion shouldn't be used as kind of a get out of jail free card. You should actually genuinely want to repent if you're going to use that kind of logic. You shouldn't use religion because you think you're going to be forgiven. You should actually genuinely want to apologise for your sins, and it shouldn't matter if you're forgiven or not. Does that make sense? I'm sure there'll be a lot of religious people out there going, how dare you, how dare you, and it's just like, this is just my opinion on it. I'm not trying to offend anybody, it's just, this book asks a lot of questions and thoughts, and yeah. And you can imagine the issues that arise when Max discovers Zoe's new relationship, because now his brother is converting him into a born-again Christian, and the people around Max are now telling him that Zoe's relationship is sinful, that a child should not be brought in to that kind of family home, that two lesbians shouldn't be able to bring a child up, and there's lots of questions there regarding what people think is the ideal family. Like the idea that if a parent dies, should the child be taken out because it's not in a mother-father based household, and people are going, no, and it's just like, then why is this any different? Yeah, you realise as you go on that Max is being manipulated by the people who he thinks are looking out for him. At first, I didn't like Max and the way it seemed like he was only using his brother's religion to try to get out of trouble. And then you start to realise that he is so lost, he does not trust his own opinion anymore. So when he gets to the point, he's just like, oh, actually, I think Zoe and Vanessa would be good parents. I'll just have a quick chat with my pastor, because surely he'll agree that they deserve to have a family, because he thinks that Zoe would be a good mother regardless. And then all his religious friends are then saying, why on earth would you give these embryos to your ex-wife and her new lover when they're two women, and they will be spreading homosexuality and teaching their children homosexuality and all this. And that's the point where I was just like, I almost wanted to throw the book across the room because it was getting me really frustrated. And then the second half of the book, you are looking at a lawsuit. You are looking at the insides of a courtroom based on the lawsuit that Max then surprises Zoe with after talking to his pastor and his brother and his sister-in-law, basically saying, no, Zoe and Vanessa, I don't think they should be allowed to have the embryos, because I am the biological father of these embryos and I think they should be going to a loving Christian family, therefore I want these to go to my brother and my brother's wife. And that's where the lawsuit comes in. They end up in court trying to determine what is the best family for these embryos. And as somebody who's always been fascinated with the law, and I'll admit, I like a good law show. I really do. One of my favourites is Boston Legal. I can rewatch that a million times over and I'm addicted to it. But yeah, I always find law shows really interesting. It's always that thing of, you know, how much are they going to get away with on TV when it comes to how they manipulate things. It's just like, I'm watching a law show and going, that's not how it works. It is a very, very powerful book and it asks questions. There is even a section at the back. It's like a reading club type thing where you... reading guide, it says at the back, and it gives you some questions to kind of ask yourself about the book, all the discussions and things. And considering it was written in 2011, the fact that it is still something that we need to talk about in 2021, I mean, yeah, it's just a very, very powerful book with very powerful themes. And it's made me realise just how much I like Jodi Picoult. I've got another book that I read a while ago, which was House Rules, which, despite me figuring out the whodunit part quite quickly, it became one of my favourite books I read. Was it last year that I read it? Because I realised it wasn't about the ending, it was about the journey that the characters went on to get there. And again, this is about the journey that these two characters go on after the events of the beginning with losing the baby and determining where they want their lives to go next, and the fact that for both of them they both end up in completely different directions as to the path they thought they were on. Zoe goes from being in a long-term relationship with a man trying to have a baby to then breaking up with him, making friends with a woman who she then realises she's in love with, so then she discovers that she is a lesbian or bi. Throughout the book she never specifically wants to put a label on it, but you do realise that she was in love with Max, but then she's also in love with Vanessa now. So the events at that beginning sent her on a completely different path as to the one that she would have stayed on if she'd had stayed with Max and continued to try to have children with him. And the fact is, when you really do look at that, you wonder if Zoe might have actually died trying to have the baby with Max, considering the fact that it was Vanessa who saved her life in the timeline that she actually ended up on. I almost feel like I'm talking about alternative realities in a bit there, but yeah, it's one that really gets you thinking. This isn't a light-hearted book. It's, as I said, very powerful themes talking about religion. There's a bit of a science thing going on, you know, the question of, you know, is an unborn child a pre-born child? They use those words in the book throughout the courtroom, and there's points when the judge presiding over the case is, obviously, he's trying to not make it completely about religion, even though religion is a big part of the case on this because of how Max decided to bring the lawsuit. The journey that was most interesting was Max's, for me, actually, seeing where that was going to go when he went from being in a loving relationship with Zoe, then realising after they lose the baby that he does not want to go through that again. And I think it's a very brave person to stand up and say, this is incredibly difficult and I'm not sure if I want to do it again. And obviously it's heartbreaking for both parties when something like that happens, but Max actually standing up and saying, I can't do this again. We've already had a couple of miscarriages and now we've lost our baby at 5-6 months. And what if we continue just to have this heartache? I can't do it anymore. So on that part, you almost respect Max for admitting that he can't do it and not forcing Zoe to go through that again, even though Zoe obviously does want to start a family at some point. The bit that it turned for me was the accident where Max looks at the authorities and says, I want you to call this guy who is a pastor, and I want him to tell me I can be forgiven for the mess that I have created. Even though at that point, it doesn't seem like he's genuinely apologetic for it, because you realise afterwards that even when he's telling people he is sober, he isn't. And then through that you then see the relationship with his sister-in-law Liddy, and you realise the relationship he's got with his brother Reed and how that flips. It's a very interesting story, and with Max's side it also shows you how easily people can be manipulated when they are lost. It is so easy. I mean, we've seen it recently in both English and American politics. You can see it all over the world, how when people just don't have that, is it a confidence? I don't know. It's just when people aren't on that a natural path, when they are lost, when they don't know where they're going, how somebody's saying something a bit iffy, but it makes them think, oh, maybe that's something I need to think about. When really they're just being manipulated by somebody. And seeing Max being manipulated, there were times where I was just thinking, I kind of saw it coming, and then at other points I felt like he was spineless, so I just realised, but it's the fact that he physically cannot stand up for himself. So there's a point towards the end when he finally does actually realise what's happening, and he is able to kind of make a moment of it. And that was the point, and it's just like, okay. Because when it comes to the ending, it is a happy ending of sorts. It just wasn't the happy ending that I was hoping for. I'd just say that. But yeah, the journeys they both go through are just completely in opposite directions. And when you realise how Max thinks of Zoe and then how he thinks of his brother and his sister-in-law, you realise that he has been in a weird space for a very, very long time. God, I'm knackered talking about this book. I knew this was going to be a hard one to talk about, but I'm surprised at how easily I was able to talk about that considering the subject matter. Sing You Home by Jodi Picoult. There's the book for you. I haven't got tea today. I've got lemon and ginger tea. Lemon and ginger, and then I put a spoonful of honey in it as well, and it is so nice. It is so nice. Right, it's 4:05. I'm cooking dinner tonight. We've got pulled pork, so that'll be going in the oven probably in about an hour. Put it in about 5ish. And then we've got noodles, egg noodles, and some stir-fried veggies, and we'll cook it all off together, and it's beautiful. Especially since I've learnt that actually you can really bring the flavour out. I put in some chilli, garlic and ginger in the pan with the pork while it's in the oven, and it really just got... Anyway, Jodi Picoult's Sing You Home. As I said, the soundtrack that comes with it is absolutely gorgeous, so really do make a point of listening to the music. As I said, there is a Soundcloud which has all the tracks on it, so I'll pop a link to that Soundcloud in the description below, as well as a link to the book. I was like, because at first I thought it was going to be a case of there'll be instrumentals that you can listen to while you're reading the chapters, but no, it's Jodi Picoult's actually written lyrics for the songs. They're just beautiful tracks, gorgeous lyrics, and they definitely complement the book very well. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. Cheers, thanks a lot. Bye!